Most men believe power roars. They think it demands attention, dominates conversations, and fills every silence. They rush to explain, to defend, to impress. They mistake volume for influence and constant chatter for genuine connection. They often think women will only respect them if they impress, if they provide, if they perform, without fail. But here's the brutal truth: they've got it all wrong. In today's world, real power doesn't scream. It doesn't chase. It doesn't need permission to exist. The most powerful man isn't the one who controls others through force or volume. It's the one who doesn't need to beg for connection, approval, or love. He doesn't get tested with silence or punished with guilt. He doesn't fold under pressure or reshape himself to keep a woman interested. Because in relationships, the weak man gets used. He gets led, manipulated, replaced. Not because women are cruel, but because nature tests what's soft and follows what's solid. This video isn't about manipulation. It's about becoming a man who can't be bent. If you're tired of overgiving, of being chosen, then discarded, of never knowing where you stand, then this is your guide to emotional and relational mastery. The kind that works whether you're single, dating, married, or rebuilding from scratch. The kind that makes women feel it, and men respect it. Let's begin. Power belongs to the man who doesn't react. Most men lose power not because they speak, but because they speak too soon. They defend too fast. They explain too much. They respond without thinking. And every time they do, they reveal something dangerous: emotional dependence. It's that desperate need for immediate validation, that fear of disapproval that makes us flinch, makes us scramble for words to fill an uncomfortable void. Machiavelli, the quintessential strategist, wasn't just penning advice for princes and kingdoms. He was dissecting human nature at its most fundamental. He warned us clearly: a prince should learn to avoid being hated or despised, and nothing renders a man so contemptible as inconstancy. Inconstancy, in our context, that's reactivity. The man who flinches first, who cannot tolerate silence, who feels compelled to justify himself, instantly loses the game. Every single time. He reveals a lack of inner stability, a dependence on external validation that corrodes his perceived value. Let's apply that to your love life. We've all been there. After an argument, she pulls back. The text messages dwindle. Calls go unanswered. You're hit with the silent treatment. What's the immediate gut reaction for most men? Panic. They fire off long, pleading messages. They call twice, maybe 3 times. They apologize for things they didn't even do just to break the uncomfortable quiet. They tell themselves they're saving the relationship, but what they're really doing is surrendering the frame. She initiated a test, a subtle emotional probe, to see if you have a center, a core of stability. By panicking, by chasing, by over-communicating, you essentially scream, "I don't have one. I am dependent on your reaction." You just proved her test right. You showed you can be bent, molded, and controlled by her emotional withdrawal. Consider my old acquaintance, Mark. Mark was by all accounts a genuinely good guy, smart, successful in his career, considerate. But in his dating life, it was a different story. He'd meet women, things would start promisingly for a few dates, and then almost inevitably, a slight emotional pullback would occur. Nothing dramatic, just a subtle shift in responsiveness. Mark's default was always to escalate his communication. He'd bombard her with more texts, more calls, more attempts to fix whatever he perceived was wrong. He'd apologize profusely, even when he wasn't sure what he was apologizing for. He was utterly terrified of silence. He perceived it as an immediate sign of rejection. And what was the outcome? Each time the woman would eventually lose interest. It wasn't because he lacked positive qualities, but because his frantic efforts to fill every void, his obvious discomfort with her withdrawal, signaled one thing above all others: weakness. He was unconsciously demonstrating that his emotional state and self-worth were directly tied to her immediate approval. He was building his house on sand, relying on her constant affirmation to feel secure. His chasing didn't convey care, it conveyed neediness. He inadvertently placed himself in a reactive, passive position, allowing her to dictate the emotional temperature of the interaction, thereby diminishing his own perceived value. Now let's take it outside relationships. You're in a business meeting. A coworker cuts you off, attempts to dominate the conversation, or dismisses your point. The average man reacts by raising his voice, trying to speak louder or aggressively reasserting himself through sheer volume. Wrong move. That's competitive, desperate energy. It suggests you need to fight for your right to be heard. The Machiavellian approach. Let silence build. Allow their words to hang in the air exposed. Make them uncomfortable with your stillness. Observe their micro-expressions, their discomfort with the void. This pause is your power. Then, and only then, deliver your words, slow, sharp, intentional. Powerful men don't compete for attention. They command it by contrast. Their calm, deliberate silence creates a vacuum that others instinctively seek to fill, and when they finally speak, those words carry an undeniable weight. Their presence isn't loud, but it's undeniable. Machiavelli also astutely observed, "He who builds on the people builds on mud." This isn't just about political power, it's about personal foundation. If your sense of control, your self-worth, your emotional stability relies on the immediate reactions of others, especially the women in your life, your foundation will always crack. You become a puppet dancing to the tune of external validation, constantly seeking affirmation to feel legitimate. This constant seeking drains your energy and makes you profoundly unattractive to those who seek strength and solidity. Silence, in its essence, is not merely the absence of sound, it is a profound form of communication. When you choose silence, you are sending multiple powerful messages: self-possession, emotional control, strategic intelligence, and mystery and intrigue. We live in an age that celebrates immediate gratification and rapid responses. Social media platforms, instant messaging, and constant connectivity have conditioned us to expect and deliver instantaneous reactions. This cultivates a reflexive habit in our communication, causing us to lose the invaluable ability to pause, reflect, and choose our responses deliberately. When you consciously break this pattern by embracing strategic silence, you instantly stand out. You become a stable anchor in a sea of emotional volatility and reactive chaos. This quiet confidence screams authority in a way that volume never can. The next time a woman pulls back emotionally, perhaps she stops responding to texts, as quickly becomes slightly cold, or begins to test you with her silence. Resist the urge to fill the void. Do not chase her energy. Do not send that lengthy, anxious text message attempting to explain yourself or elicit a response. Instead, hold your posture. Observe. Allow her to wonder what you're thinking. Let the silence become her burden, not yours. Create a space where she feels the need to re-engage rather than you chasing her for it. Then, and only then, if a response is truly warranted, speak with calm brevity. One sentence. No pleading, no paragraphs, just a concise, intentional statement that either addresses the core issue or moves the conversation forward subtly. For example, if she suddenly goes cold after a great date, instead of texting, "Are you okay? Did I do something wrong? I'm worried." Consider a simple, confident re-engagement after a period of non-reaction thought of our date. "Hope you're doing well." Or more powerfully, wait for her to re-engage if her coldness was indeed a test of your resolve. Because a man who stays silent under pressure becomes the one no one can predict. He becomes an enigma. And a man who can't be predicted can't be controlled. He becomes a formidable force, not just in relationships, but in every facet of his life. This subtle mastery makes him magnetic, not because he's playing manipulative games, but because he embodies an unshakable inner peace and self-possession. Your stillness is your strength. Your silence is your shield. By mastering the art of speaking less and watching more, you reclaim your power. You build an unshakable inner foundation, and you become the kind of man who attracts genuine respect, deep intrigue, and a profound connection that transcends fleeting emotional highs. You become sovereign over your own spirit, a fortress of calm in a chaotic world. People, especially women, don't respond to facts. They respond to the story they've already written in their mind. And once that story is set, even your best actions will get misread. This is the concept of the frame, the underlying context or perspective through which an interaction is understood. If you don't establish your frame, someone else will, and it's usually to your disadvantage. Machiavelli taught us this with chilling clarity. Men in general judge more from appearances than from reality. All men have eyes, but few have the gift of penetration. He wasn't being cynical. He was being brutally honest about human psychology. Perception is power, and if you don't consciously shape it, someone else will, usually to your detriment. Let's bring this to relationships. You keep giving, constantly adjusting your behavior tirelessly, trying to prove yourself, hoping she finally sees your worth. But here's the insidious problem. She may have already decided that you're trying too hard. And once you've been framed as needy or as someone desperate for approval, even your genuine confidence looks like compensation. Even your heartfelt generosity looks like an attempt to buy affection or alleviate guilt. You're pouring effort into a pre-existing narrative that is working against you. Consider my friend Chris. Chris was an objectively impressive guy, successful entrepreneur, physically fit, articulate. When he was interested in a woman, he would go above and beyond. He'd meticulously plan elaborate dates, shower her with thoughtful gifts early on, always be the one to initiate contact, and constantly talk about his achievements, thinking he was showcasing his value. He truly believed he was demonstrating how great a partner he could be. But time and again, the women he pursued would eventually cool off or put him in the friend zone. Why? Because his relentless efforts and constant need to prove himself created a frame of over-eagerness and underlying insecurity. The women didn't see a high-value man. They saw a man trying to convince them he was high value. His detailed date plans felt less like thoughtful gestures and more like an attempt to impress. His constant self-promotion came across as a need for external validation. Even when he genuinely felt confident, his actions were being interpreted through a trying too hard lens. He was constantly defending a value that paradoxically he needed to simply embody. Now flip the script. You say less, you move slower. You speak when necessary and walk away when it's not. Suddenly, she starts assigning you traits you never had to announce mysterious, grounded high value. Why? Because you controlled the frame before even attempting to influence the outcome. You didn't tell her you were confident. Your calm, deliberate actions framed you as such. You didn't say you were high value. Your subtle self-possession implied it. This is the art of strategic presentation. In everyday life, this plays out identically. Two men enter a room. One is silent, well-dressed, and calm. He observes more than he speaks. People instinctively feel his presence. They automatically assume status competence and a quiet authority. The other man tries too hard to impress, talks excessively, explains himself before being questioned, and laughs too loudly. And even if he objectively has more skills or achievements, he's perceived as insecure, seeking validation. Same facts, profoundly different frame. Machiavelli would emphasize, everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. The game then is not to be fake or deceptive. It's to reveal strategically. It's about understanding that perception is reality in the eyes of the beholder, and you have the power to shape that perception by controlling the frame you operate within. The frame is the invisible structure that gives meaning to an interaction. It's the implicit context that dictates whose reality is dominant. When you're in a weak frame, you are reacting to someone else's terms. When you establish a strong frame, you are setting the terms of engagement. Controlling the frame is not about manipulation in a harmful sense. It's about presenting your authentic value in the most effective way possible. It's about letting your actions and demeanor speak louder than any words you could utter. When you don't over-explain, when you don't rush to justify yourself, you create space for people's imaginations. They often fill that void with positive attributes because the human mind naturally seeks meaning and assigns order. This creates an aura of desirability that is far more potent than any direct self-promotion. You want them to assume your value, not to be told it. Stop chasing admiration. Stop forcing proof. Instead, cultivate a presence that speaks for itself. Appear with purpose. Move with deliberate intent. Speak with intention. Let your words be scarce, valuable currency, not loose change. And crucially, withdraw when necessary. Let her fill the blanks with imagination, not with excessive information. For example, instead of detailing every single accomplishment, let her discover them through subtle hints or casual mentions. Instead of explaining why you couldn't respond immediately, let her wonder. Your absence or your deliberate silence forces her to engage her mind, creating curiosity and intrigue. Because a man who doesn't desperately try to be seen often becomes unforgettable. He becomes a puzzle worth solving, an experience worth having. And in a world ruled by perception, where narratives dictate reality, that's how you win without noise. That's how you establish an undeniable presence that commands respect and natural attraction. Attraction truly begins in the mind. And if she doesn't respect your mental clarity, your judgment, and your fundamental understanding of the world, she'll never truly stay loyal to your emotional investment. Most men try to win women by overgiving emotionally. They flood her with compliments, constant affection, long messages, and tireless effort. But they forget one critical thing: her pre-existing belief system shapes her attraction, not just your raw effort. Machiavelli would never have wasted time charming someone who had already made up their mind to distrust him. He believed in something far deeper, more foundational. He stated, "The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him." Translated, who you choose to surround yourself with, or more importantly, who you choose as a partner, profoundly reveals your judgment. And this extends to the underlying beliefs you tolerate or implicitly agree with in your interactions. Let's make it real. In relationships, you might message her all day. You send gifts. You try desperately to prove you're not like the other guys. But you never pause to ask, what does she actually believe about men? Does she see men as inherently weak, easily replaceable, or dangerous? Does she even truly want genuine love? Or is she primarily seeking validation and attention? Because if her core belief is that men always disappoint, or all men are liars, or real love doesn't last, no amount of heartfelt messages or grand gestures will fundamentally change that deeply ingrained conviction. She might admire your effort, she might enjoy the attention, but she will still eventually leave. Not because you lacked emotion, but because you lacked strategy. You were trying to fill a leaky bucket, pouring your precious emotional resources into a vessel whose foundation was fundamentally flawed by limiting beliefs. Consider my client, David. David was incredibly kind, devoted, and financially secure. He met a woman he was deeply attracted to, and she seemed to reciprocate his interest. However, she constantly talked about her past relationships, recounting stories of men who had cheated, lied, or abandoned her. David, with noble intentions, saw himself as the one who could heal her wounds and prove that not all men were the same. He became her constant confidant, her emotional support system, her therapist. He listened for hours, offered endless comfort, and went above and beyond to make her feel safe and loved. Yet despite all his efforts, a profound underlying distrust persisted in her. She would constantly test him, look for signs of deceit, and whenever he was busy or couldn't respond immediately, she'd jump to the most negative conclusions. Eventually, the relationship crumbled. David was heartbroken, unable to comprehend why his unwavering devotion wasn't enough. The issue wasn't David. It was her fundamental belief system. She believed men were inherently untrustworthy. David had tried to win her heart without first engaging and subtly shifting her mind. He failed to address the root of her perception, leading to an inevitable breakdown. In everyday life, this also applies. Suppose you're at a family dinner. You try to convince your cousin that your innovative business idea is sound, but he's already convinced you're not serious or capable enough. You present data results, detailed plans. Still nothing changes. Why? Because people aren't moved primarily by truth or facts alone. They are moved by what they already believe to be true. Their pre-existing convictions filter all incoming information. Machiavelli understood this intimately. He famously said, "Men are so simple and so obedient to present necessities that he who deceives will always find someone who will let himself be deceived." This isn't an endorsement of deception, but an observation of human susceptibility to what they want or believe to be true. The real game isn't played on the surface with grand gestures. It's played in the deep-seated realm of perception and belief. To win the mind, you need a more sophisticated strategy than merely displaying raw emotion. It's about understanding her psychological map, communicating at the belief level, and avoiding the fixer role. For example, if she expresses a belief that men never truly listen, your response isn't to say, "I'm a good listener." Instead, you actively demonstrate deep listening skills. You might paraphrase what she says to show understanding, ask insightful follow-up questions, and remember key details she shares. Over time, this consistent, authentic behavior will subtly erode her old belief and replace it with a new one. This man actually listens. This shift in her internal belief about you, and potentially about men in general, is far more powerful than any fleeting emotional high. Before you pour your emotional resources into a woman, take the time to observe and listen profoundly. Ask subtle, non-judgmental questions about her views on men, on relationships, on her past disappointments. Don't immediately jump in to fix or offer solutions. Simply seek to understand her pre-existing mental framework. When you grasp her psychological map, you can then calibrate your own behavior to avoid inadvertently reinforcing her negative beliefs. Instead, you position yourself as the consistent, reliable, and high-integrity man whose actions naturally contradict her past experiences and limiting convictions. You become the exception that disproves her rule. Because when you win the mind, when you subtly shift her deep-seated beliefs about men and the nature of relationships, her heart will naturally follow. You won't need to beg for love. You'll receive it as a natural consequence of becoming a solid, consistent, and understanding man. You'll move from being just another guy to being the one who inspires a fundamental re-evaluation of her previous perspectives. Every woman, like every human being, wears a mask. Sometimes it looks like unwavering confidence. Sometimes it looks like biting sarcasm, fierce independence, icy coldness, or total control. But underneath that carefully constructed exterior, there's often a genuine need for validation, a deep-seated fear of rejection, or an old wound she desperately doesn't want you to see. This mask isn't necessarily malicious. It's often a self-protective mechanism, a shield built from past experiences. If you react to the mask, you lose. You'll find yourself arguing with her surface-level attitude instead of understanding her underlying fear. You'll defend yourself against her silence instead of decoding her unspoken expectations. Your interactions will be shallow, frustrating, and ultimately ineffective. But if you can learn to see through it, you don't just win the moment. You gain leverage, quietly, calmly, and without a single battle. You gain profound insight into her true self, giving you an advantage no amount of superficial charm ever could. Machiavelli observed this intricate dance of facades in every court, every kingdom, every power circle. He famously wrote, "It is double pleasure to deceive the deceiver," though his intent was not to advocate for harm, but to gain insight without exposing your hand. This principle is about discernment, not duplicity. It's about understanding the game being played without becoming a pawn in it. Let's break it down in modern terms. In relationships, she might say, "Do what you want." So you do. And then suddenly she's cold, distant, dismissive. That's not genuine indifference. That's often camouflaged attachment or a subtle test of your boundaries. She doesn't want to appear needy or controlling, but deep down, your action or inaction genuinely affected her. The average man either gets frustrated, starts over-explaining himself, or attempts to placate her. He reacts to the coldness, but the strategic man, the one who embodies the principles of Machiavellian presence, doesn't react to the mask. He doesn't attack. He mirrors, not by becoming cold himself, but by responding with calm understanding, not confrontation. He observes how the mask slips when external pressure fades or when a moment of genuine empathy is offered. He recognizes that her outward behavior is often a smokescreen for deeper, more vulnerable emotions. I recall a vivid instance with my friend Sarah, who was dating a man named Tom. Sarah was a strong, independent woman, but she carried past hurts from relationships where she felt men were unreliable. One evening, after a slight disagreement, Sarah sent Tom a curt text. "It's fine. Do whatever you want." Tom, being reactive, immediately launched into a lengthy explanation of why he was right, or why he had to do what he wanted, essentially arguing with her, "Fine." This escalated the conflict because he was arguing with her mask of indifference, not her underlying feeling of being dismissed or hurt. Later, Tom started working with me. A similar situation arose. Sarah said, "Don't worry about me, I'm completely fine." This time, instead of arguing or trying to fix it, Tom paused. He recognized the mask. He responded with a calm, non-reactive text after a few hours. "Understood. Hope you're doing well." He didn't chase. He didn't push. He mirrored her perceived indifference, but without being dismissive. The next day, Sarah initiated contact, admitting she had been upset, and had used that phrase out of frustration, not genuine indifference. Tom's calm response allowed her mask to drop naturally because he didn't give it anything to push against. He showed he saw her, not just her defensive facade. In everyday life, this discerning insight is incredibly powerful. You're in a store, and the cashier is cold, almost rude. Instead of snapping back or complaining, you simply smile, slow down, and calmly ask, "Rough day." And suddenly her demeanor softens. The mask breaks because her behavior had nothing to do with you. It was a reflection of her own inner struggles. Just like many women's attitudes aren't about you, they're about her inner battles, her fears, her past conditioning. The same thing happens at a family dinner. An uncle aggressively criticizes your career choice in front of everyone. Instead of reacting defensively with ego, you calmly listen. Later, you discreetly find out he's just been laid off, but hasn't told anyone. His outward pride and criticism weren't confidence. They were a shield for his own vulnerability and fear. If you had reacted with ego, you would have completely missed the deeper truth. The ability to see through the mask requires strategic empathy and profound emotional detachment. Strategic empathy means you're not just observing what they do, but actively seeking to understand why they do it. Emotional detachment means you must not allow your own emotions to be triggered by their mask. Seeing through the mask isn't about exploiting someone's weaknesses. It's about empowering yourself by not being manipulated by superficial behaviors and instead engaging with the deeper, more authentic person beneath. When you consistently do this, you create a psychological space of safety for them to reveal their true selves. And this builds trust and connection on a level far deeper than superficial interactions, because you demonstrate a rare understanding and strength. Don't try to fix or fight her pride, defensiveness, or seemingly negative attitude. Instead, mirror it, not in a confrontational way, but by reflecting her implied emotional state with calm acceptance. Let her feel seen, not exposed. Ask calm, subtle, open-ended questions that invite deeper sharing without demanding it. Offer emotional safety by showing you're not easily rattled without trying to solve her problems for her. Then patiently watch. If her pride drops and a genuine softness or vulnerability appears, she's authentic. She's willing to reveal her true self. If the mask stays glued, if she remains in her defensive posture despite your calm presence, then quietly and completely withdraw your energy. Don't confront her about it. Simply reallocate your focus. Because the man who can see through armor and remain grounded himself becomes magnetic. Not just to women, but to every room he walks into. He becomes a master reader of human nature, a quiet strategist who understands the unspoken language of the soul. The moment a woman fully understands you, the moment she can reliably predict your every move, she starts managing you. Why? Because predictability, while it can make her feel safe, does not sustain attraction. Mystery, on the other hand, makes her feel something far deeper: anticipation, intrigue, and a profound respect. It compels her to lean in to invest her own curiosity and energy into deciphering you. Machiavelli never wrote about dating, but his lessons apply perfectly to the dynamics of personal magnetism. He warned, "Men in general judge more by the sense of sight than by the sense of touch. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are." Translated, let people see enough to believe in your value, but never enough to fully control you. Keep the core of yourself sacred and slightly out of reach. In relationships, if she always knows how you'll react, if she can always predict your next text, your next gesture, your next emotion, you've already lost the vital tension that fuels attraction. You always text first. You always explain how you feel. You always give her instant, complete access to your thoughts, reactions, and time. At first, she might love it. It feels like reassurance. Then she gets used to it. Then she gets bored because nothing about you feels earned or exciting anymore. The chase, even a subtle one, is over, and with it, often the intrigue. I witnessed this pattern repeatedly with my client, Ben. Ben was incredibly enthusiastic and open when he started dating. He'd share his entire life story on the first few dates, his detailed daily schedule, his deepest fears, his past relationship dramas, his entire emotional landscape. He thought this was being vulnerable and transparent, building intimacy. Initially, the women he dated appreciated his openness. But within a few weeks or months, a common complaint would surface. "I feel like I know everything about you," or "there's no mystery." Ben became too predictable, too accessible, too quickly. The thrill of discovery vanished, and with it, the magnetic pull. His open book approach, while well-intentioned, ultimately robbed the relationship of dynamic tension and intrigue. But the man who moves with purpose, who doesn't show his every card, subtly keeps her emotionally alert. He's not being cold. He's not playing childish games. He's simply staying composed, deep, and subtly unreadable. He understands that while transparency is important for trust, complete predictability stifles attraction. He cultivates an inner world that she has to earn glimpses of, not one that is handed to her on a silver platter. In everyday life, observe this principle in action. You're at a gathering. Everyone else is loudly talking about their wins, their detailed plans, their strong opinions. You listen more than you speak. You maintain a calm, observant demeanor. People notice you, not because you're loud, but because your quiet presence and selective communication force them to wonder, who is this guy? What's he thinking? That unanswered curiosity becomes your aura, your magnetic field. The same applies at work. You don't announce every task you're doing. You don't fiercely defend every single idea. You let results speak for themselves. And because no one can fully predict your next move, your promotions, or your insights, they respect your presence and your contributions more deeply. Your unpredictability breeds respect, not chaos. Mystery is not about being deceptive or dishonest. It's about consciously controlling the pace and amount of information you reveal about yourself. It's about maintaining a private space, a core of intellectual and emotional independence that no one can entirely penetrate or claim ownership of. Avoid the open book trap. Understand the value of absence and space. Cultivate intellectual and emotional independence. Mystery creates a powerful pull because human beings are inherently drawn to what they don't fully understand. It stimulates imagination, forcing the other person to invest more of their own mental and emotional energy into trying to decipher you. This is a crucial shift. They are investing in you, rather than you constantly investing in them to maintain their interest. Here's the precise shift that builds aura and magnetism. Stop revealing everything. Start speaking less than you know. Hold back some insights, some opinions. Start revealing less than you feel. Don't wear your heart on your sleeve. Let your emotions be discerned, not declared. Start moving less than you're capable of. Don't always show all your cards, all your skills, all your energy. Because when a man becomes perfectly predictable, he becomes manageable. He becomes another item on the to-do list. But when he moves like a mystery, calmly, powerfully, intentionally, with a subtle depth that keeps others curious, he becomes unforgettable. He becomes a force of attraction that draws people in not by shouting, but by the quiet magnetism of his own intriguing presence. And that, my friends, is the essence of true masculine power and attraction in the modern world. If you've made it here, you've already done what most men avoid. You've faced the mirror. You've dared to step away from the comforting illusions of what society often tells men they should be, and leaned into a profound truth about power presence and attraction. In a world that often teaches men to earn love by shrinking themselves, by constantly apologizing, and by perpetually performing, you've chosen something exceptionally rare, unconditional self-respect. Most men live on emotional autopilot. They chase validation with a desperate intensity, only to resent the women who, by their own design, now control them. They confuse raw emotional intensity for genuine intimacy, chaotic drama for true connection, and obedience to another's whims for authentic love. They unwittingly surrender their inner kingdom for fleeting external approval. But you, by embracing these Machiavellian principles of self-mastery, are building something else entirely. Not noise, not neediness, but presence. A presence that is deep-grounded and utterly undeniable. This isn't about being an arrogant alpha or a manipulative player. It's about becoming a man who is so inherently strong and self-possessed that he naturally commands respect and draws others into his orbit. These Machiavellian rules were never meant to make you colder. They were forged in the crucible of real-world power dynamics to make you clearer, to help you see through the smiles that subtly manipulate, to shield your own soul from being shaped by someone else's fleeting fantasy or unrealistic expectations. Because let's be honest, most heartbreak doesn't come from being outright rejected. It comes from the insidious pain of being accepted for someone you're not. Someone you performed to be only to find yourself utterly lost and depleted. But when you choose to live by your own design, not by external reaction or a desperate need for approval, something transformative happens. Your strategic silence becomes a powerful statement. Your carefully defined boundaries become unshakable fortresses. And your love, when you choose to offer it, becomes a deliberate choice, never a desperate leash. It becomes a gift, not a plea. From this moment on, you don't need to explain yourself away. You refine yourself. You don't fight to prove your inherent worth. You simply become a man whose worth is self-evident, a truth reflected in your calm demeanor and deliberate actions. You lead conversations without dominating them. You inspire genuine attraction without needing to tirelessly perform. You demonstrate strength not by the volume of your voice, but by the quiet conviction of your principles and what you steadfastly refuse to tolerate. This is how true kings are made. Not in opulent palaces, but in the quiet, often solitary moments of profound self-mastery. This path requires courage. It demands introspection. It calls for the discipline to pause when every instinct screams to react. So keep building. Keep choosing alignment with your true self over fleeting external approval. Keep protecting your peace like it's a sacred kingdom, for it is the source of your true power. Because the man who walks in clarity, grounded in his own truth, doesn't chase. He attracts. And what he attracts truly respects him. Stay calm. Stay strategic. Stay sovereign. And remember, you're not here to be loved for a mask. You're here to be respected for your truth. One last message for those who truly want to transform their lives, for those who are ready to detach from the emotionally reactive 99% and play a different game, a game of self-mastery and authentic influence. What I'm working on, the deeper insights and practical applications of these principles, will fundamentally change the way others perceive you, and more importantly, the way you see yourself. It's coming soon, so make sure you're ready. If this message resonated with you, if it sparked a flicker of recognition or a desire for change, don't just keep it in your head. Like this video to commit this principle to your personal growth. Write a comment below, even if it's just a few words, an insight, a question, or a shared experience. It helps you remember, and it might just spark a revelation in someone else who needs to hear this. Share this with someone who, in your gut, needs to hear this message right now. Just trust your instinct. We're all on a journey to become clearer, more solid from within. So let's build minds that don't break,